Hey guys, and welcome back to Donica and Shelby Read. I'm Donica.
I'm Shelby.
And it's probably one of my favorite monthly wrap-ups. No, for sure my favorite. October, spooky. We try to fill the month with spooky reads. I think I kind of succeeded. I'll give myself an A+ for effort.
I give myself an A for effort too, actually, because this was a busy month and I still managed to read not a ton of books.
You read
but
a big
I read
one.
some big books.
Yeah.
Also, I'm a little nervous for this video. I haven't even told you.
What?
I read a few books. I read half of my books I did not think very favorably of them. I don't know, just a warning. My section might be a little negative.
Hey, that is what we're here for, right? The truth. The truth is out there.
That's our slogan.
I know. I think that belongs to someone already, but
the truth is somewhere.
Not here. Somewhere else in another channel. So the thing, and I've already said this, horror books are so split. Some hate and some love. You know what I'm saying? So until you can find maybe what you like, it's like trial and error.
And some people, even no matter what trope it is, they'll think that's so tired and they'll be mad because they saw it coming. And some people are like, well, I don't care if I saw it coming. Was it a good book? But some people are like, no, I want it to be super twisty. I don't know what's happening.
Exactly. Some horror is very slow. Yeah. And it's more like this ominous presence, you know, and like for me, you know, I like fast paced. So something like that might not be appealing to me, but maybe you love atmosphere. I don't really care about atmosphere.
We'll probably see the differences in the way we talk about
books.
And
I'm gonna go first, talk about my books. And Shelby will round this out. Okay, here we go. The background is really nice though. It's like a little spooky too. Okay guys, I'm so excited because I did complete 10 books. So I had started Spooktober in September, like 2 weeks left of September. So in about a month and a half, I was able to knock out 10 books. And overall, I was really happy with the books I selected. So what I'm gonna do is give you my star rating, and I'm also going to do a spooky rating with a little pumpkin. So instead of like 5 stars, my spooky rating will be either 0 pumpkins, was not spooky at all, or 5 pumpkins, super scary, could not sleep. I don't think I had any of those actually. I'm still trying to figure out what books scare me. So I started off with one of my really highly anticipated reads, The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones, because I read his book, The Last Final Girl, I believe. So that book, I talked about how his writing style was super unique in that book, kind of confusing, but I loved the story and I was super excited to get into this because I thought that writing style was so unique. This one, just the story and the writing style would be more easier for me to read. I do believe that Stephen Graham Jones is part of the, I wish I would have looked it up. Hold on a second. He is a Native American, but he does specifically say he did not grow up on a reserve, so he had to go out and find people to talk to and really learn about reservation life. This book is following 4 American Indian men from the Blackfeet Nation who in the past, like when they were young teenagers, they went on a hunting trip and something went horribly wrong. And now you flash forward to the present day, they're kind of grown men living their lives, and it almost seems like something is out to get them or haunting them. You're kind of trying to figure out how does it relate to the past. Also, there is that little, you know, part of it being Indians that's also kind of a neat, something you don't see every day. And the story was very interesting. It was very different. What I have found about Stephen Graham Jones is he has a very unique mind. Like, the story was different and interesting, and I think you should go into it not really knowing too much about it. Once again, the writing style was very different and I did not like it. So I think this being the second book I've read by him, I was super happy because I'm like, okay, this is a must-read author for me. But now I'm kind of believing that I won't really be a fan of how he writes. Just the style, it kind of takes me out a little bit. So I did end up giving this 3 stars because I thought it was unique. But overall, the story, I didn't love how it wrapped up. And in terms of my spooky meter, I would give this, the things that creep me out are if something is there, like something might be somewhere lurking around our main character and we don't know if something's there, almost like a jump scare in book form kind of. And this did that. So while not being overall super scary to me, this was one of my, like, maybe the only book that creeped me out for like a second. So I'm gonna give this 2 pumpkins, okay? So now I'm gonna move on to The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. This book was an easy 5 stars for me. I mean, actually immediately jumped to one of my favorite reads of the year. Basically, I would feel like more of a mystery thriller. So all you kind of know about this book is that there is a serial killer. There's a child that has gone missing. It says revenge, death, and a house at the end of an ordinary street. This house relies heavily on kind of keeping you in the dark and kind of keeping you a little confused, but not in an unpleasant way. Kind of like in a way that as you're reading, you're trying to work out what is going on, and little pieces of the puzzle start coming together. There's a few point of views that you're following. One of them is a cat. I am not kidding, y'all. The first book, probably non-fantasy, that I've read, that we have a cat as a point of view, and you're just like reading it, you're like, this cat, we have to protect this cat at all costs. She is just a lovely little lady. Her name is Olivia, and we're following her and her owner. Her owner's name is Ted. And we're also following a woman named Dee, and she is the sister of the child that went missing. She's kind of out trying to solve the case of her sister that went missing years ago. We're getting these different perspectives, and we're kind of trying to figure out who is the villain in the story. Like, what happened, what went wrong, who can we trust, other than the cat, who is absolutely perfection. This is definitely a book that I'm going to reread, because when you get to the end, like the twists and the turns, it's just, it really did kind of blow my mind, and it made me like really want to immediately go back to the beginning and start over and see all of the like clues that you didn't know were clues. To me, this kind of reminded me of The Grace Year, not in like story terms, but in how when I started reading it, I didn't realize how deep it would go and how it would make me feel. Catriona Ward really at the end had me kind of just sitting there like, I did not realize I was going to have these feelings. It was a great read. Spookometer was 0. That was not spooky at all. So 0 pumpkins for that one. The next book I picked up was on Kindle Unlimited. I was really in the mood for just a quick read after this like left me mentally just like reeling. I decided to pick up this kind of easy read, and it's called Halloween Fiend by C.V. Hunt. The cover just really, I think I was sold by the cover. It kind of seemed like a really spooky fast read. The town's name is Strange, I believe. There's no E, so Strange, maybe. And it's a small town where every night it's haunted by this creature, and the citizens have to kind of put out an offering of a small animal. It's only 100 pages, so not too much graphic violence in the terms of like the animals, but they do have to leave something out. Some people have cats. Our main character has like gerbils to like sacrifice. The creature's name is Halloween. So as long as you leave out a little offering for Halloween, he will pass by your house and leave you alone until the next night. Around Halloween, they have this festival. They basically draw straws, essentially, and one of the citizens is sacrificed to Halloween, and that's part of kind of the truce they have with him. Once a year you can get one of us, and then every day you'll get a little animal that we leave out for you. Kind of this book just speaks on being brave, kind of going against the mold. Like, everyone's so comfortable in the town of Strange. They just have this bizarre truce. No one's trying to get out of it at the cost of thousands of little animals and residents yearly. While the story seems very interesting, it did not blow me out of the water, but I think for what it was, 100 pages, I did end up giving this like a 2.5 stars. It wasn't horrible, but it didn't like blow my mind. Spooky meter, I'll give this a 1 pumpkin, because that Halloween dude was a creepy creature for sure, and I think this was like maybe one of the few books I read where it was kind of like creature horror, which I just love that. I wish I would have looked for more of that. The next thing I completed was Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. I had been slowly reading this for months because I was reading it along with Swish and Flick, the podcast. So those episodes are like an hour or two, the podcast. So by the time I would read the chapter, listen to the podcast, it was kind of taking me time to really slowly get through this. But I finally finished. Of course, this is 5 stars. And the Mina Lima edition, they just released the Chamber of Secrets edition, and I pre-ordered that. I got it that same day. Absolutely beautiful. I have ranted and raved, not ranted, but I've raved about this book over and over and over. I vowed to never do it again, because if you have not purchased this by now, I can't force you. That was a 5-star, and I highly recommend, if you're reading this, to read along with Swish and Flick. They give such good insights, and it's all G-rated. They don't cuss or anything, so you could even listen along with your kids. The next book I read was The Last Graduate by Naomi Novik. This was book 2 in the Scholomance series. This was one of my most anticipated reads of the year. Did not disappoint. Maybe disappointed a little bit, but not too much. I did give this 4.5 stars. We're following our main character, Galadriel. That's her name, Galadriel. She lives in a school that is determined to kill all the students, and you have to survive 4 years. You come in as a freshman, and you cannot leave until like the final battle, the end of your senior year. Not many people make it out, and everyone does have like magic. They build up their mana through something you don't like doing. So if that's push-ups, just some sort of activity that you takes kind of energy and you don't want to do it, that helps build up the mana. So I think the magic system is kind of interesting. There's definitely like a class system, people who are more privileged than others, and this one really kind of speaks on that a lot. And you have like Galadriel, who is like the bottom of the barrel. No one wanted to help her, no one wanted to team up with her, which in this school, if you don't have like a team by the end of your senior year, you're done for, because that's the only people that are going to look out for you are the members of your team. Like, it's dog eat dog, everyone for themselves. And Galadriel is our, the trope of the one person that everyone doesn't like, who essentially you find out is like the most powerful sorceress ever to have lived. So you have that kind of dynamic of people realizing more in this book, like the power she holds and how she could hold it over their head. Like, you did nothing for me. Why should I do anything for you now? Like, you're clearly just using me. But Galadriel is such a awesome main character. She has a heart of gold, which is kind of goes against the prophecy foretold about her when she was little, that she was going to be the most evil dark sorceress to ever exist. So she has that over her head while she's also trying to make it out of this school, and it's just a mess. So this book overall was really good. I think it was a good addition to the first one. Like, you're continuing on right as the first one ends. The only thing I was disappointed with was one of my favorite characters, Orion. He doesn't like make an appearance until almost halfway through the book, because the first half is just getting all of the basics of school and like the exams and this and that, like just the basics of this book out of the way. And then the last half is kind of more of like getting training and ready for the big battle. Starts off really slow, but then once you get going, it's a lot more fun. And then I was also disappointed with like the ending and how she chose to wrap it all up. Well, there is another book, but how she chose to wrap up this book, I thought was a little disappointing. But overall, fun. I cannot wait for the third one. I just think these books are so unique. So after all of those books, I was just looking for some easy reads. So I started with Horror Store by Grady Hendrix, Grady, unlike Stephen Graham Jones, Grady is like an all-around, I feel like, solid author for me. Like, I know I'm gonna like all of his stuff. This is the second one I've read by him, and this Horror Store, if you can look at it, you can see it's a play on IKEA. It was a super fast read. It's 240 pages. So I gave this book 4 stars. On the spooky meter, I'll give it 2 pumpkins. I think it definitely had its creepy parts. So in this book, we're following our main character, who is kind of just getting by in life. She is not thriving, but she's also not you know, doing as bad as she could be. But she's working at this store called Orsk, which essentially is exactly like IKEA. Some strange things have started happening around the store. They'll come in, like everyone will clock in the morning and things will be broken or out of place or dirty. When we first start reading this, there's like a stain on a couch, one of the couches, that smells suspiciously like feces. And so at that point, the manager, who is like a bad A manager, I mean, he runs the store like a tight ship, and he's like, okay, we gotta get to the bottom of this. I draw my line at feces. So he calls in a couple of employees and he says, hey, after everyone clocks out, we are going to stay overnight because the big wigs are coming tomorrow. So let's just stay the night. I will pay you overtime. I'll pay you double pay, whatever. Let's try to figure this out. Can you imagine being in IKEA at night? So scary. Just too many nooks and crannies for me, for my liking. Although you could just like go from room to room. I mean, it's essentially a house. But anyway, as they are staying there, you know, things get weirder and weirder. Our main character's like going to the bathroom to just try to like get away from the manager, who keeps trying to like give her pep talks. And every time she goes to the bathroom, she feels like there's more like graffiti on the wall and it looks dirtier. And she's like, am I going crazy? Or is this bathroom getting dirtier? Like, are things changing? I don't understand. So it almost seems like at nighttime the store is shifting into something else. I highly recommend this as like just a fast, fun read. It's kind of like, I would say, like, I like to describe some books as like a budget horror movie. So this is kind of like a budget horror movie book. Well, it wasn't perfect, but it was a lot of fun. And I think it was a unique story. If he had really fleshed it out, I think it would have been a little better. But for what it was really fun. And I decided, you know what? Let me throw in this graphic novel, The Witches. I picked this up knowing that I would probably be burnt out towards the end of the month, which I was. And this is The Witches, the graphic novel by Roald Dahl. And this was illustrated by Penelope Bagu. And Penelope knocked it out of the park. The illustrations are absolutely wonderful. I think if you have read The Witches, the novel will be even more fun for you. I've never read The Witches that I can remember. I read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Matilda, the BFG, but this was one I never picked up. And it was like a little dark at the end. So it was like, but I was talking to my husband about this book, and he kind of was like, well, aren't all of his books kind of dark? You know, there's always kind of like a little undercurrent of something ominous, something dark happening to the child, something sad. And I was like, you know what, you're right. So this did not stray far from that. There was a little darkness to it, but I ended up giving this 4 stars on the spooky meter. This was a 0 pumpkins. It was not spooky at all. It was fun though. I recommend this for sure if you're a fan of Roald Dahl or if you're a fan of The Witches. I think this would be a really great addition to your collection. We are following our main character who has come to learn about witches and how to spot them. And he goes away on vacation with his grandma because she's like a heavy smoker. She has like coughing fits, and the doctor prescribes her with basically going away for a little bit. Go get some fresh air by the ocean. So they go to this hotel, and unfortunately for the main character, this hotel is now hosting this annual conference of, I don't know what they're lying and saying they are, but it's basically the annual conference of witches. To spot a witch, they show that witches are hairless. They don't have any hair on their head, and they get like sores too. So they all wear wigs, but they're like so itchy. Like their scalp is always so itchy that they're always scratching, and that's like one way to spot them. And that made me so itchy. Do you get like that, Shelby? When something's like, if something's talking about bugs or like someone being itchy?
I get it in my hair.
It's like scratching. Like I would probably look like a witch to anyone who was looking out for them because I was getting so itchy. The next book I read was Amari and the Night Brothers. This was my mid-month middle grade book. I was supposed to make a video on it, but then I just mentally became unstable, so took a hiatus on making videos. But this was a 5-star, and honestly, I really need to sit down and just film because this was one of my favorite middle grade reads of the year. I have come to the conclusion that it was top 2, 1 being Wilder Lore, 2 being Amari, and then 3 being 3 Times Lucky. So for it to have overtaken 3 Times Lucky, which is the middle grade book that I have absolutely obsessed over since I read it, you know it's good. So I don't have the book on me, and I was like, where did I put it? And I remembered my son is reading it for the second time. So he read it and now he's rereading it. I mean, he read it I think 2 weeks ago and he's already rereading it. So he loves it. This book is just 5-star, spooky meter 0. It's not spooky, but it is incredible. We're following our main character Amari, whose brother Quentin went missing, and it seems like everyone has given up on Quentin. They kind of think he's just a runaway. Amari does live in the projects. The police are kind of maybe not trying as hard as Amari or her mom would want, but Amari is not giving up. And one day in the closet, she finds this like suitcase, and she doesn't remember it being there. And in the briefcase, it has something that says "for Amari's eyes only," which opens her up to this magical or paranormal world where just all kinds of fantastical things exist. And this was the world that her brother Quentin was in. She basically gets a nomination from her brother to join this world, to become part of the workforce in this world. And that's where she kind of learns what happened to Quentin, begins this quest to succeed in this world that she knew nothing about, to try and continue the search for her brother, now that she has this extra like piece of the puzzle that she was missing about where could he be, what happened. So in order to save him, in order to find out more information and keep the search going, she has to essentially go through what the other children of her age are going through. And it's like this tryout that happens during the summer where they do different challenges, and it's knowledge of the supernatural, paranormal world. Your abilities are tested physically, mentally. So Amari is kind of thrown into this world where these other kids grew up kind of knowing this was going to be their path. But it's okay, because Amari is like a super special, smart, strong little girl. And just reading this and just seeing the story unfold and Amari unfold and her abilities unfold, and just the twists and turns along the way were so fun. I think B.B. Alston goes into more than just, fantastical drama. I think he speaks on different things, whether that's with race or privilege or culture or things, and it was just so fun. So that was definitely a 5-star read for me. And for my son, clearly that's like a 10-star, because he's right on his second time reading it. So the next book I read was The Burning Girls by C.J. Tudor. This was my first time reading her, and I'm definitely a fan now. So it says she's the author of The Chalk Man. I am definitely going to be looking into that. In terms of spookometer, I'll give this 1 star. It was a little creepy, but it was just barely creepy. So I think the premise was interesting. Actually, I give this 3.3 to 3.5 stars. Oh, what did I write? I had a little review right here. I said, I didn't find this particularly spooky, and I won't judge it as a horror novel, because to me, it was a mystery or / semi-thriller with possible paranormal aspects. It did have some of my favorite things though. Short chapters, multiple point of views, and decent twists. There you go. What more do you need? That sums up The Burning Girl for me. Shelby's going to dive a little bit more in depth with this.
Why do you like it?
Why do I like it? I mean, I gave this a 3.5 stars. So to me, that's just like a solid read. Why did I like it? What can I say?
Let me bring
I always am a fan of short chapters and multiple point of views. I know
exactly why now. You know
what?
when we did our intro and you were like, I love with just fast pace. Some people like a build up, and that's some of my notes.
Okay.
I get it. Okay. I knew this is more your style. I will say it was I wasn't expecting
the twists.
A lot of the twists, and there were a lot of things that came together at the end.
Yeah. Between this and The Lost Village, I liked The Lost Village more.
Yeah.
Which is so funny, because
we thought this was going to be like an upgraded,
I thought
more robust.
Which was like sad. Why was I doing that to The Lost Village? I feel like when I read, I'm like, I'm here for a good time, not a long time. And so if a book is going fast, and it's really easy to please me. So I can see Shelby, who likes reading like stories that are very in depth, or things like that might be like, oh, I don't know about that one. The final book I finished in October, which as I round out my talking, I really did not have like super spooky reads. The spookiest ones I read were maybe these two, and they were not super scary. But what I ended up finishing up October with is not a spooky read at all, but A Court of Silver Flames. I finally did it. This has been on my shelf since release day because I am Sarah J. Maas's biggest fan. I have this thing where when I'm super excited for something, I just can't read it right away sometimes. I just can't. I'm gonna say who this main character of this book is because I don't feel like it's too much of a spoiler other than you knowing that they still are alive. But this follows the main character, Nesta. She is Feyre's sister, and I hate Nesta. Before this book, I hated her. I couldn't stand her. And I was thinking, you know what? Sarah J. would not write a whole book to let me down. I know she wouldn't. I just know it in my heart. 100 stars, first of all. And you know what? 5 pumpkins, because it's spooky how much I love this. This was the spookiest read of the month because I was so scared at my love for this book. It was so good. It was so good. Every time I read a book by her, I'm just like, how can it be this good? So A Court of Thorns and Roses is my favorite series by her. My next tattoo is going to be the Night Court symbol. Right, it's actually going to fill up this space right here on my hand. The little mountain's going to be there, and there's some stars. So I hated Nesta going into this, and when you read this book, if you hate Nesta too, I think a lot of people, maybe some people don't like this. Maybe they think it's slow. Maybe they think it's not a lot of action. But as someone, like for me, this was like super healing to read. Nesta, who was going through great depression, she was absolutely self-destructing. And you're reading it and everyone around her is hurting and she can't see it. Like, she can't see the pain she's causing. We can see it. I could see it. That's why I hated her. But just reading from her perspective and just seeing her grow throughout the book, holy cow, it introduces new characters that are now some of my favorite characters. It introduces something really special towards the end that Nesta is a part of that I'm just like, I have chills thinking about it. For a lot of the book, 75% of the book, it's very slow. Nothing's happening. It's just healing. It's just reading about Nesta healing. It was so beautiful. And dare I say that Nesta is now one of my favorite characters. If I have any more comments to add in the little description box, I might put like a little comment or two about each book as I'm editing. And I'm like, oh, you should have said this, but your brain just goes. I turn on that camera and my brain turns to mush, okay? But here's Shelby with her well thought out, planned, documented ideas and thoughts and ideologies.
Have you ever seen a latte being made?
No, I'm scared.
Hi, everybody. So I will now begin. Maybe I should grab my notes. I'm already starting to feel my
I told you.
Alrighty, everybody. So my October has been lovely as far as reading. I felt like I always had a book in my hand. Like, there wasn't really a time where I wasn't reading something, which is really nice. I essentially read the same amount of books per month that I usually do. It's just I didn't sit down and read it all in one go. I essentially just always had my books with me, and anytime I had a free time, I started reading. I felt like this is an awesome way to read. Before, I just sat down and had like 4 to 5 hour bursts where I would just be like glued to the book with nothing distracting me. And this month I actually was able to spread out my reading and sort of pace myself, and being able to jump back into a story made me like anticipate what was going to happen next. I will say I hardly read a single thing in September. September was just not a good reading month for me. So everything essentially that I read, like I read in October. So I guess I'll start off with a book that actually took me like 4 months to actually get about reading. And I've talked about this like 4 times on the channel because I've been trying to read this book for so long. It's The Secret History by Donica. Now, the reason that this took me so long to read is because it first got brought to my attention after we read The Maidens. I was super excited to read it, but then it was like dark academia, creepy vibes, and so I was like, okay, let me wait until we're into a little more into fall. When it was September-ish, I was like, oh, this is like the perfect time. I should read it now. So I ended up picking it up. It was slow for me to get into, and then when it got to the point of like our spooky reads, I was like, I'm gonna have to sit down and read this. I say that I'm gonna give it, I would love to give it something lower than 3, but the story stuck with me so much, and I think about it all the time. Like, I'm constantly thinking about the story and the characters. So it really did stick with me. I give it 4 pumpkins of fear because the characters weirded me out.
You're such a good silent listener. I can't. I want to laugh.
It's okay. Just laugh. It's hilarious. It's like I have a laugh track and will make everything I say better. This book is not creepy at all. The creepiest thing is the characters. And I'm sure anybody who has read The Secret History or heard of The Secret History knows why the characters are so weird. I always do this. I start getting into my thoughts before saying kind of what the book is about. So essentially, with The Secret History, kind of straight man, Richard Papin, I think his last name is, he leaves his little town in California and he goes off to this, oh gosh, where in the world is this college? Oh, it's set in New England at a college called Hamden College, and it's sort of like a prestigious college. At least the vibes that I'm getting from it are that it's prestigious, but it's not like a really, really prestigious place, but like it's still for the rich kids to go. So Richard gets in on a hefty scholarship, and he has just been so bored with his life so far that he kind of just wants to start a new life. So new that he's literally fabricating his entire identity. That's not even a large part of the story. It's just like he fabricates his new identity at the start, and then that's just like the person that he is for the rest of the book. So he like lies about, you know, he doesn't have money, but he wants to be able to fit in with all the rich kids. Well, there's a certain group of students that really catch his eye. I mean, the best way that I can describe them is just like the Sims that I used to let me bring back in my Sims that I used to make when I was in junior high. Everybody is like super pale and skinny, and they wear trench coats and glasses. That's the kind of students that he sees, and there's like a little group of these kinds of people, and they study Greek. He is obsessed with the idea of these students. He wants to be in their clique. Essentially everyone at the college is like, you don't want to be friends with those people because they are stuck up and they're weird, which normally I don't think that's very nice to say to someone. Oh, sorry, I thought someone was dressed like Olaf, which normally I'd be like, that's not nice. Why would you say that about people? No. This book is all about how truly strange this group of students is. So Richard actually ends up getting into the clique. He's sort of the outsider of the book, kind of like the outsider straight man looking in, just observing the world of these students. But he gets like totally pulled in because a murder happens. And that's literally the very first thing you find out in the book, is that they killed someone. So you know from the beginning of the book that someone named Bunny was murdered, and that's the only story that he can tell because it's stuck with him forever and he's so guilty. So you know from the very jump that this group is capable of murdering someone, and the entire book is just kind of unraveling how it came about, what led up to the murder. And in a way, it's kind of happened because of their obsession with Greek and like the Greek life and rituals. So I do see how this kind of ties in with my love of the Maidens, and like why someone who liked the Maidens might like a book like this, because they're both dark academia and Greek tragedies and Greek stories, all of that. Until this book was brought to my attention, I had never heard of it. Once it was brought to my attention, I kept seeing it everywhere. All over Pinterest, I saw it, and people have it on their bookshelves for fall. They'll have it like with a cup of coffee. And after reading the book, I'm like, this is the book that y'all are putting on y'all's shelf for the world to see. Like, I felt so weird after reading this book. I guess the reason is because I think that Donna Tartt, and a lot of people are like, maybe I just didn't get the book. Like, maybe I wasn't smart enough to get the book. But I encourage you, don't let the book have that much power. I even at some points was like, maybe I just don't get it. But no, I get it. It's almost not necessarily a satire, but like she has these over-exaggerated, pretentious, rich kids. Most of these kids are so wealthy to the point where they don't have to worry about money. One of the kids in the group is so wealthy, he's just in school kind of for something to do. Like, it doesn't matter whether he passes or fails. Where for Richard, he has to make it through college, because if he doesn't, that's his last chance. That's his only shot. So I know she's kind of like, look at these rich kids, and they're like doing drugs, and they're going crazy, and they're like, there's so much in this academic world, and they're getting caught up in all of it. It almost feels like she's writing of like, what they're doing is bad. They're bad people. So it seems like she's trying to push that, but like secretly deep in her heart, and it comes out in the writing, she like loves them and is obsessed with them, and they're always talked about as being so beautiful, and the way they smoke is beautiful, and they're all alcoholics, and it's like, it's supposed to be like aesthetically pleasing as well. And the whole time I'm just like, this is just nonsense. The last 200 pages of the book is probably just them, what their life is like after the murder and what things look like. They're still just as disturbed and deranged as they were before the murder happened. Like, not much has changed. But I will say something that I think of, like, every time I think of this book, I feel like I had a very vivid dream. Have you ever woken up from a very vivid dream and you remember it immediately after you wake up? After the vivid dream, you wake up and you remember everything about it, but as time goes on, maybe a year later, you still remember that vivid weird dream, but you only remember the highs and the lows. Like, that's what this book is to me, because it was very atmospheric, I will give it that. It was a beautiful setting, and I think that's another reason why I do want to bump up the stars, because it gave me everything I wanted in terms of something atmospheric to read during fall, because the landscape was just described beautifully. But the story itself, I don't know. I just really didn't like it. I'll say this one sentence that I wrote from like when I was like brainstorming about this book, and if it's not good, we can take it out, but I just think it's so funny because I feel like it kind of sums up how I feel. I wrote, I feel also like people who dislike this book make it their entire personality trait that they didn't like it, and the people who did like it make beauty is terror their personality trait. Like, that's a quote from the book that everybody like starts their review off with, like, beauty is terror, true beauty is frightening. I can write an entire essay about why beauty is not terror, but anyways. So I'm gonna give it 3 stars because it did make an impact on me, but I don't want to be one or the other. Like, I don't want to be those people who are like, I did get it and I'm super smart and I hated it, and I don't want to be the people who are like, I got it and I'm super smart and I loved it. I'll be in the middle and admit that there's probably some things that I didn't understand and I just didn't really enjoy it. Without going too far, do you want to mention one other thing? Last thing, maybe it's just a little nitpicky, but I didn't like that all of the characters that were described in the book were always described as like otherworldly beautiful, and it's because their skin was like so pale and they were so skinny. I don't know, like that was the only standard of beauty of the book, and like the main girl who is the entire book is obsessed over. Like, everything about her is beautiful, but she's described as just this super pale, she's just so pale and skinny, and like, that's just reiterated over and over and over again. And I think that there's only like one person of color maybe ever mentioned in the book, and they got like a slur said at them on the news. So I'm kind of like, I don't know, maybe I missed a few people of color, but definitely if there was one in that group, I don't think they would have gotten into half the nonsense they did. I'm grateful that I read it because I can't stop thinking about it. And now I know about The Secret History by Donica, which I feel like there is like life before you know about the secret history and life afterward. The next book that I'll talk about The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. So The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving, I gave it 5 stars. This is the kind of story that I love. I loved everything about it. Let me tell you, I gave it 5 stars and I give it 2 pumpkins because it was not scary whatsoever, but it did have an eerie atmosphere. I feel like the whole story was like written with a smile. Like the writing was so whimsical, and I like literally laughed out loud sometimes because the writer was just being so silly as he was writing. The descriptions were beautiful. I went to kind of go see what people thought about Sleepy Hollow after the fact. And there are people who love the book. They're like, this is a fall classic. And there are people who hate it. They're like, 1 star. It was so boring. What's with all the description? So I think I'm very lucky that I went into it never having seen Sleepy Hollow. I kind of thought it was going to be a children's story, so I didn't know what to expect. And I'm glad that I wasn't expecting like some life-changing thriller or horror short story, because I can tell that some people were very disappointed, because The Legend of Sleepy Hollow is super like rich and lush in description, and probably the most atmospheric thing that I read. It really put me into the world. But essentially, if you don't know what The Legend of Sleepy Hollow is about, it's a very short story. It's a very quick read. We're following the main character, Ichabod Crane, who is a school teacher. He has a crush on a farmer's daughter, and the farmer's very, very rich. So he's like, ooh, maybe I can woo her and I'll have lots of money, and she's also really pretty. There's an issue. She's already courting kind of the most popular guy in town. He's this jockey, well-liked guy. In fact, the story kind of never really gives you a reason to dislike the jock. Really, if anything, Ichabod is kind of the one who, you know, trying to woo his girl, and Ichabod like wants the money. Kind of see how this plays out. And the entire short story, there are just little urban legends like woven in and out of the story. It was such a beautiful, eerie, I don't even want to say eerie because I feel like that's an overstatement. It's just a slightly creepy, super cute. The writing is beautiful. And I think people were expecting some super impactful, like hard-hitting story. I feel like it's just a fun fall read. If you go into it and you just read it for what it is, then I think it's amazing and I would love to read it again. I actually loved how descriptive it was. I didn't think that the descriptions took away from the story. Like, if without the descriptions, there's no story. That's the entire thing. I gave it 5 stars. I really liked it. Yeah, I really, really liked it. My next book I'll talk about is The Shining by Stephen King. This is the first time I had ever consumed any Shining content. I've never seen the movie. I'd never even heard about the movie. I didn't even know what it was going to be about. Like, some people could probably tell you, oh, it's about a hotel. But I went in completely unknowing. I had no clue what The Shining was going to be about. I gotta give it 5 stars. And the pumpkin rating, is it out of 5? Is 5 being the scariest? I give it a 4 because I was never scared out of my mind, but I did read it during the day a lot. But there were some really creepy things that I was like, who thinks of this? This is so creepy. And I didn't realize it would be creepy until it was in this book. The Shining, I kind of described what it was about in our last read, or what we're going to read for Spooktober. But if you've never heard of The Shining like me for some reason, a family essentially moves on top of a mountain. The dad gets a winter caretaker role at this hotel that has a bunch of tragedies happen at the hotel. Is the hotel haunted? We will find out in The Shining. So that's my quick little blurb about it. Getting into my thoughts. So I'm a haunted house lover. I love haunted house books. I love when they are actually legitimately haunted. It's not someone living in the attic. It's not, is it a ghost? Is it not a ghost? I love when it's like, no, the house is essentially a person and it wants to kill you. Like, I love those kind of books where it's just truly paranormal. And that's something that I love about Stephen King. Well, I've only read 2 of his books. I read Salem's Lot, loved, still, I would love to read it again. And now The Shining. And I love that with Stephen King, he has this old-fashioned, classic, traditional sense of good and evil. Good is like good people. In the 2 books that I've read, children are good. It's just good in its purest form versus evil. And when he means evil, he means like demons, the devil, paranormal things. Like, it's just this classic good and evil. And I love that he brings that into his books. And when something's paranormal, it's actually paranormal. Like, there are actually creepy things happening. I loved this book. I thought it was great. There was so much paranormal content in this book. Also, what I loved about the book was the characters. It was so hard to read because Stephen King also doesn't hold back. I mean, the dad has anger issues. He's an alcoholic in recovery. And as I'm reading the book, I realize I'm just as scared of this father falling into his vices and hurting his family as I'm scared of being outside of the hotel in the creepy playground during the middle of the day. Like, those 2 things are both equally terrifying in this book, and I think that is just amazing. I loved that there was just this feeling of dread throughout the entire book, because if you're not scared of the ghosts, you're scared of the dad, and you're thinking like, what is this guy gonna do? So I haven't actually watched the movie, but I have read that the movie might be a little bit more about the dad's descent into madness than it is about the house slowly taking over, which in that case I wouldn't really want to see the movie, because I think the coolest thing about The Shining is that these people are all almost like prey, and the house is like preying upon them and making their lives miserable. And I think that is super cool. Like, I love that the house is almost a person itself. It reminded me a lot of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, The Haunting of Hill House. And I believe that the Hill House was even mentioned multiple times in this book, which makes so much sense because I saw so many parallels between the 2. Jack is super vulnerable. Jack, the dad of the novel, he's super vulnerable with his anger issues and his alcoholism, and he has so much guilt, so many skeletons in his closet. he is super vulnerable for this house to prey upon. And then his son is gifted with supernatural abilities. One of the characters in the novel calls The Shining, the sun shines, essentially. And in the novel, there's tons of people around the whole world who shine, which means maybe it could be anything as they just have an intuition when something's going to go wrong, all the way full blown to like the small kid from the novel, where he can read other people's thoughts. Maybe people who shine a lot or have the shining at like a great extent, they could like psychologically attack someone with their mind. So I think that that's a really cool concept. So of course, if his son shines, so he is prime real estate, the prime target of the house. The house, you know, wants to feed on that sun. It is just classic. Like, it is classic supernatural. I think that's everything I would have to say about The Shining. I'm so glad that I read it. It was also extremely atmospheric. I felt like I was really in the hotel, this huge, scary hotel that just wants to eat you up. It was really scary because I felt so isolated with the family. Like, the book makes it clear they are snowed in from the rest of the world. They're not getting out, and that is so terrifying. Now I'll move on to the last book that I'm going to talk about today, which is The Burning Girls by C.J. Tudor, and that's the one book that I actually have right here. I gave Burning Girls 2 stars. I was gonna do 1 star, but then I realized I actually really liked the ending. The ending kind of made up everything for me because it wrapped up really nicely, and it was pretty satisfying, I will say. Up until the ending, I was just... It took me so long to read this book because I was just cringing the whole time. I will give it a pumpkin score of 2. Because it wasn't scary to me at all until this one part at the very end. I was like, oh, okay, that's actually pretty scary. I had to put it away because I was reading it at night. And so that's got to give it some points, even though that was the only point in the entire book I was scared. With The Burning Girls, an unconventional vicar and their daughter move into this town, and so many bad things have happened here, but this is their new location. They're here now. This is the new place where the vicar was assigned. It's a little village, seems to have some secrets. Bad things have happened there, and people seem to know more than they're letting on. Creepy things happen in this town, and the vicar and their daughter are just exploring the town together and maybe unearthing some of the secrets that lie within. It seems exciting. It seems like an exciting premise. However, the reason that I did not like Midnight Library is the same reason I did not like this book. I read Midnight Library and Anxious People in the same month. I could not stop thinking about these 2 parallels. Midnight Library talked about depression, suicide, anxiety, the difficulties of life, and I feel like Anxious People tackled a lot of the same issues, but I feel like one of them just did so much better, and I feel like the Midnight Library, I felt like it was kind of telling you what conclusions you should go to, and I have a whole video on it. Whereas Anxious People gave you a lot to chew on about grief and human emotion and depression and anxiety, and it gave you a lot to chew on, and you could come to your own conclusions, and it was just refreshing, and it was really deep, and that's the only word that I can think of to use. I feel like Burning Girls sort of did what Midnight Library did to depression to religion, where I feel like there were so many points that C.J. Tudor wanted to make about how she views religion or how she thinks it should look. And I think that's great. I actually love reading stuff like that. I feel like Stephen King does that a lot in his novels as well. He kind of talks about, you know, is there a God? What does it look like? What should the presence of God look like in your life if it's there? And this is what I think it should look like. And I love reading stuff like that. I love even reading criticisms on religion, specifically Christianity. I think, you know, I love reading those types of criticisms. However, I feel like there was not much nuance to C.J. Tudor's thoughts. Sometimes it felt like the vicar was kind of just like the megaphone, and C.J. Tudor was just using it to kind of say some of her thoughts about Christianity. And it almost to the point where I feel like it was to a detriment of the vicar, because the vicar and the vicar's daughter, I feel like, had this kind of mindset of like, they're very special and unique. Like, the vicar constantly talks about how their daughter, they like love their daughter because their daughter is so different. She's like not a normal girly daughter. She's the Winona Ryder from, what's it called? Beetlejuice. And especially the vicar, I feel like the vicar sometimes is like, I'm not a normal vicar, I'm a cool vicar. I don't even like Christianity, and I listen to The Killers and My Chemical Romance. And it's like, okay, we get it. Like, you're an unconventional vicar. I don't know, like, it was just a little distracting. Something I didn't like was that I felt like things were revealed so quickly, and I like a buildup of dread, which is so funny because Donica liked that it was so fast-paced. But for me, I was like, I even wrote in my notes, I'm like, this book can use a heavy dose of dread. Like, I just want that feeling to just get creepier and creepier. Like, what's happening in this village? But I feel like it just was so revealed so quickly. But I will say, I wrote that early on in my notes, and later on in the book, I feel like the dread was really pumped up, and I was starting to feel really, like, creeped out with, like, what's going on here? How bad is this? And it actually ends up being bad, so that was satisfying in the end. I have one last thing, and I feel like I'm being so nitpicky, like the other, when I was talking about The Secret History, where I was like, I just didn't like, you know, the beauty standards that were so like articulated in that book. I will say something that, and maybe it's just because I'm sort of sensitive to this right now or something, I don't know why I kept picking up on these things, but I felt like the vicar kept talking about how beautiful their daughter looked, kept mentioning how thin. I don't know, I feel like I kept picking it up, and then the daughter also kept mentioning how it'd be 5 p.m. and she hadn't eaten all day. And that was multiple times throughout the book.
Well, it could be kind of like a little trigger for you, too. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, it's not healthy for you at this moment.
I did want to mention that as well, because I feel like it was brought up so many times, and it's like, the daughter looks breathtakingly beautiful, so thin and so pale, and I'm like, why in the world did you have to mention that? Cut to this where your arm is in it. Anyways, everybody, I feel like it was slightly negative, but I really did enjoy everything that I read, and also the things that I like nitpicked at, they really just affected me on some level. It's just the way that I read it, and it's the way that it presented itself to me. So I hope that no one thinks that I'm like purposely trying to say like these authors did it on purpose, but it's just the lens with which I've lived my life and led me to read it that way.
And I feel like
let's go ahead and transition to both of us together now.
I feel like if I were to write a book, I know 100% my book would have mostly people of color. So CJ Tudor, I want to say she's English. I just think some authors, you can't get mad at authors for writing what they know.
That's
when
true.
I would get mad, and we are harsh on authors writing what they don't know.
That's true.
Don't write about illegal immigrants crossing the border, you know.
Yeah.
Me attacking that one book.
I know. All randomly. I think it is good. Like, we're a booktube channel, and this is how we read books, and I think it's a learning process for me, because I didn't read a lot before this year, so now that I'm reading these things in books, I'm like, why do I feel a little weird about this? But at the same time, yeah, CJ Tudor is she's not, well, I don't want to say she's not a person of color. What if she's from Spain or something? I think it's just natural that I'm like starting to pick up on these things as I'm reading more. And since I don't always have, I feel like I'm not, you know, I can't speak for everybody. I can only speak on the things that I'm starting to feel. That's just some of the thoughts that I had. And yeah, those were just some of my thoughts. And that's what I read this month.
Because I didn't pick up on that at all. But once again, what might upset someone, or, you know, you just kind of unnerve you a little bit, like, doesn't affect me, but that's also that I have some triggers that you would just go over like nothing, and I'm like really affected by it.
Like some of the Stephen King stuff.
Exactly. There are some things I have to draw a line at, and you're like, give me more, you know, but you're like, wait, fair skin? Draw the line.
It's just the lens with which you read. Everybody reads through a different lens.
True.
So
I mean, even us. I mean, like literally siblings. You know, you almost can't get more similar, and we just are so different in reading. But I think, is there anything else you?
No more criticism. Thanks for sticking through to the end of this video. Did y'all read anything spooky this month? That's my question.
So. I know
a lot of people were going to be reading Mexican Gothic this October. So I'm not sure if y'all ended up reading that. Don't forget we have a book talk. Let us know what spooky stuff that you read.
We'll be seeing y'all next month or the month after. We're relaxing, you know, we're trying to enjoy reading again. It's the end of the year. I get burnt out always at the end of the year. I've read almost 70 books. Last year, I think I read almost 80. But at the end of the year, I did this like graphic novel sprint. So all of December, I just read graphic novels. So that was like a lot of my, you know, books towards the end of the year. Y'all have a safe and happy holiday season. I'm ready for Thanksgiving.
Me too. That made me hungry just thinking about it.
We eat so good. All right. Well, y'all take care. And we'll see you on our next video.
Bye.
Let's do a thumbnail just with our drinks. And then I'll hold up like 2 books. And you hold up your book. The Burning Girls, your one book.
I know. It's because, well, one of them's not here, and then I read most on Libby. Well, this looks too festive.
Oh yeah, it's
Hold
spooky. Hold on. Forgot it's spooky. Like we're only talking about 3 books.
It would still be good content.
It would still be. It's gonna be like a runtime of like 60 minutes. It's definitely not 2 books. I swear, you being in here always gets me so nervous. I don't know why. Okay.
Wait. Do you want me to leave?
No,
I'm going to.
I'm fine. No, I'm not.
Let me go read over my notes in the other room.
No, I gotta get through this.
Fine.
I gotta get through my fear of you. So those were all of my books I read. You know what? I feel like I was a little rusty. I'm always rusty when I talk about books.
I'm never rusty. I probably did say.
Don't say it.
What?
Don't spoil it.
But that's literally one of the first things. It's.
Yeah, don't spoil it. That's a spoiler.
Is it really? Okay, fine. Then they can fall into the trap themselves. Now I see why those big ones get canceled all the time, because I have got near slip-ups. You've protected us. You've shielded me from the cancellation so many times.